My name is Kelly Watts. I help tired women who want to leave teaching use their transferable skills and get started in coaching. And I also help new coaches as well, who are doing their courses. They know how to coach, they just don't know how to build that business. So that's what I help them do, get off the ground and get it going for them. So you can find me on social media. So I am Kelly Watts Coaching on Instagram, and I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook, and I'm just Kelly Watts on that. So please send a request. I just loved getting to know people, helping people, even if it's just this parent, the single parent. If it doesn't have to be anything to do with business. If we got something in common, I'd love to connect and share our stories.
Perfect. So do me a favor, take us right from the beginning. So what was the genesis of you getting involved in this and why?
In the business side, sorry, is that what?
Yes, as a business side as well as your personal journey as well.
Right. So basically, I've always been so in my jobs, I've never been like the top dog, basically. So I never had a degree. Um, I would just be that customer service, or I was in my previous job, I was a social work assistant, and now I've just left a teaching assistant job. So I've always felt like I bottom of the ladder, if you know what I mean. And then and on top of that, then being a single parent for most of that time, I couldn't work full time. I only had one income. And so although he didn't go without I felt that as a parent, when you have kids, life would have been different basically. So the beginning of last year, I hadn't long moved in with my partner. We've been together a couple of years, but we hadn't lived together, so it was very much still me and my son at that point. So we and I think I was thinking about this the other day actually, and I was thinking about going back a little bit more on the journey and how I got here. And I think that move it must have clicked something inside of me to think that, do you know what? I've just got onto this rut where I've been on my own for 8 years, bringing up a child, and that is now time for me to unleash myself. There's now more to life. I feel like I can look for an opportunity. I can do that. So I was a teaching assistant because I retrained to be more present for my son, basically. So I trained to be a teaching assistant when he started school. Then we went into lockdown. And then since then I've worked in a school with SEND children, so ch children with special educational needs. And I was a one-to-one. And it got to a point at the beginning of last year, which is just a few months after I'd moved in. And I was just thinking, there was just no satisfaction. I was thinking, there must be more to life. I'm tired. I'm coming home from school, getting my son, and then we're back and forth, our hobbies, running a house, trying to see, be with your partner in the evenings, and then just going to bed absolutely shattered. And I was just, there's more to life, but I didn't know what that was. So I thought I want to start working for myself somehow. Again, I didn't know what to do, how to start, what I wanted to do. So I just started looking at online courses, reading books, and just trying to learn everything I could about business, basically. So it sort of evolved from there. So last summer, I decided this is going to be my last year working in a job. From next summer, I'm quitting and I'm just going to go full speed ahead and work full time in my business. And that's where I am today. So,
I know a lot of parents, especially single parents, they struggle to
mm,
find like a balance between dating, working,
mm,
relationships, promotions, and then you still have the constant juggling of raising a child,
yes.
right? So when you were going through what you're going through, how were you able to find a balance or at least work towards the balance between the two, as well as raising your child?
So if I just give a bit of background about how I was a single parent. So since I was pregnant, basically, so the other person hasn't been involved. So I literally did it from birth on my own. So it got to a point when he was a couple of months old, I did start looking at the dating scene, and then just I tried a couple, and then one or two things, and then something clicked. It was like, do you know what? I thought I needed that. but I don't actually need a relationship. And I think letting go with that, I don't need that. I've actually got everything I need here with me and Oscar. So I put that on the back burner then for a couple of years because it just didn't bring anything into my life. I had everything I needed. So it was only then I think he was 2 or 3 and I started like dabbling into the online world a little bit. The online dating world, like Plenty of Fish and all of that basically. And then it just takes up a lot of time and energy. And like when you've got like a 2, 3 year old and you're working, it's still not the right balance because you can go on a couple of dates and then it doesn't go well, and just that uses a lot of energy which you don't want to give. And like at the time I lived at my auntie's house, so I'd have to put my son to bed and then go out, on this date and then come back. But although he was only in bed, it was like a couple of hours of my much needed resting and time and my energy of doing this. So again, it went on the back burner again a little bit because people aren't in tune to other people's emotions and feelings. Like when I used to go on it, I would only talk to one person at a time. I would only meet with one person at a time because I find it difficult to properly invest and make an effort if you're talking to 4 or 5 different people, because things can get confusing how you're going to get to know someone if you're trying to have 4 different conversations. But it did take up a lot of energy, and then the turning point came then during COVID. So obviously it was me, my son. I was trying to homeschool him. He was only 5 at the time, so it's a long time being on your own with kids. And then when we come to the end of it, then I realized if this was to happen again, which it potentially could, I wanted to be with someone if it happened. So then at this point, then I started back on on the apps again. I started chatting to someone and then I went down the pan a little bit. And then I was speaking to one of the other school mums and she said, I, I remember like feeling like this way in a way because she was at a stage in her life where basically I think she was in her 30s and she wanted a baby. And then she said that, right, it's a numbers game. You've literally just got to go through the numbers until you find that one, basically. So not in a bad way, knock them off the bed sheets, not in that way, just in a sense of you just got to keep going. It's a numbers game, and so you keep going until you find your number, basically. So I thought, right, I'm gonna put a completely different spin on it. I went back on and I thought, right, I'm gonna meet with someone, we'll have a cuppa. If it don't go well, whereas before I would come off, it'd take me a few weeks to sort of, emotionally rebalance because, like I said, it takes a lot of time and effort. I thought, right, I'll, if we meet up, it doesn't go well, that evening, I'll just go back on and start talking to people. Like I think of it as the numbers game as opposed to, the long run, basically. So then I started chatting to someone, and then we met up, and now 4 years later, he was my number one. And now 4 years later, we're still together. So it's just how that perspective, that mind shift completely changed everything, the way you go about and the way you think about it.
Well, congratulations on
Thank you.
finding love through it. I have a couple of friends that they're on the dating apps, and to your friend's point or your coworker's point, it's 100% they would agree. It's a
Mhm.
numbers game because they started off similar to you, or it was slow. One person maybe, and then that didn't work out. Okay, another person, or maybe two, but it's literally okay. You gotta work. Okay, identify. Okay, this person's not gonna work. You move on, right? And you have to figure that out, and it is very, very time consuming. And one thing that I try to recommend to the women that because I work with women at a charity, is that when they get back on the dating market, the dating app is easy because it's right in your hand and you could essentially discuss that part of it from your
Mhm.
home any time of the day, literally, right? But you have to mentally prepare yourself because it's different than meeting someone in person, where you may meet one person maybe two a month. With a dating app, you can meet 10 people today, 10 matches tomorrow, 20 matches, and you literally have to kind of filter out, and you have to dedicate your time to it. And there's one single mother who did just like you. Like she would put her child to bed, and then she would go on her date. So as she's putting the child to bed, she's getting ready. So she has like her shirt on, her heels on, and things like that. And it was definitely a struggle for her. When you're helping the single parents now, maybe take some of that skill set into the business side, the work side, do you find that they have a difficulty maybe transitioning some of the skills that they're using while dating into the workplace, or is it like an easy balance for them?
Um, it's a bit of a difficult one really because obviously when you become a parent and a single parent, you're doing the job of two people. So I think it's hard not to help because when you have kids as well, like since I've had my son, like my brain has not stopped because even when they're sleeping, you're still, right, what's the next thing we've got to do? What's the next? Are they okay? Are they going to wake up in the night, in the morning, first thing you do? You know, he's 9 now as well, mine, but it doesn't stop. You're constantly on your mind. So I think you bring a lot of skills to the job. And the one thing I found was when I had that before I had my son, I didn't date the right men. And having those breaks, and especially those couple of years breaks where I learned to love me. And then when you go onto these apps as well, you can see those bad ones a mile off, and you have that respect for yourself. As before, it would be, oh, I want to talk to them because they might be the one. It was just like, do you know what? I'm a mum. I'm not being messed around. I don't like the sound of it, so I'm not going there because it's not just me at risk now. I'm at risk of if a child is brought into a relationship, it's everything that you're putting them in front of it as well. So it makes you toughen up a lot as well. And you take less crap basically because you value yourself. And it's really important as well, you don't jump from one to the other because you've got to get that, lift yourself up and have that you and your kid first. And then if anyone else doesn't align with it, then there's no room for them basically. But then on the other hand as well, I sometimes find it difficult, but there's someone there to share with as well, someone there to take. I still sometimes on that always on fight or flight mode. Can I help? No, because if you left, I'd have to do it myself anyway, if you know what I mean. So you still, I think you take that flight or fight mode with you everywhere. So it's good in a way, but sometimes you may overtask because you're used to doing lots of things, or you're worried about being let down, or someone not being able to do the job in the right way, if you know what I mean. So it's hard really. So there's lots of good skills, but they're not always positive.
Why do you think so many people fall into that trap of allowing someone that isn't the best for them into their lives when they're trying to um date as a single parent?
Because they're not in a place where they value and love themselves. They've either been worn down and got that way for a reason, and they haven't given themselves time to heal. They're just jumping back and forth, back and forth. So, because they haven't allowed themselves to heal and truly value them, it's just that they just get back on the game and they just naturally attracting that because that's what they're used to. It's not in a way, but whereas now a lot of people I'd let walk over me before, I wouldn't let that happen now, basically. So they just haven't learned to love themselves or feel the value or feel they're important enough to say no or this isn't right.
Sometimes I think to myself that because single parents are so consumed by being the best parent that they can be because they're doing the job of two people, I wonder if they allow certain things to happen just because they're so focused on other areas, and maybe they don't necessarily see these bad behaviors in the beginning because their focus is so stretched between work, themselves, and the children. Do you think that maybe single parent on the dating scene have a different time trying to date versus someone who's single without children?
Completely. So when you're a single parent, you don't think, oh, I'm mum and dad, because you get on with it basically. You've got the child and you get on with it. So when you're in that situation, you don't actually think, oh, I'm doing mum. It's only when people actually point out to you, you realize how much you're actually doing. And it's not until you're going through it or you've gone through it, you look back and think, wow, that was hard. I can't believe I did it on my own. So I think, again, if you've had children and you're still meeting those wrong people, you still haven't healed. You're still in that situation where whatever's gone on in the past, you haven't learned to love yourself and put yourself first. So I think it's really important. If anyone said to me, "Oh, be your advice," if you've got to be single for 5 years and meet the love of your life, be single for 5 years rather than a 5 more years of this energy being taken from you, because that energy you need for your kids. And it is definitely easier for someone without kids to date than someone with kids to date. Because, like I said, with the children, it's either you've got to try and get childcare for them, or like, me and your friend, you're putting them to bed and you can't tell them you're going out because they won't go to sleep and that. And then you can't say I'm too late because you're absolutely knackered, especially like when they're toddlers, because they're up at 5, 6 in the morning. And it's a completely different dynamic. Like when you haven't got kids, there's lots you don't think about, but when you have kids, there's, even when you're there on your date, it's always there on your mind, and then you feel, oh, I've left them. You've got that mum guilt then of going out because you left your kids behind, and then you feel, oh, am I doing the right thing? When you're a single parent, well, when you're a parent at all, you've always got that guilt. We adapt when we become parents, you adapt that role of parent, and sometimes we can forget our identity as well. You put your kids first for everything, especially when they're younger, because they need to come first. And we quite often forget who we are and we lose who we are as well. So it's only when they get a bit older and you can start bringing little bits back into your life that is meaningful to you, to make me Kelly and not Mum, that's what's really important. But I think people haven't got to that stage where they've healed and value themselves, put themselves first, and that's why they're attracting or still going for, or allowing people not to be the right person just for the sake of its company as well. So I think people just, even if you're going to be single for 2 years, you need that time to heal is really, really important. Otherwise, you're going to carry on meeting those wrong people. So when I was in the great position of, if basic, are we allowed to swear? Can I swear? If he was a dickhead, then basically it would been off, deleted, back on, let's meet number two, basically. So, but for I was in the right place where I allowed that nice person into my life. So it was like I changed my mindset, and I wouldn't allow myself to go for anything else. If it didn't work out right, that was it. I was going to go straight back on to number two. So you've just got to allow yourself that really important time to heal and love you and put you first as you, and not just as mum.
I think some people also forget that there's a number of single parents out there that they're single parents because the other parents they don't have a healthy relationship with. So if they're not healed, they could be attracting that very thing that they just escaped from, or that past relationship that is still haunting them in some sense because it was so toxic or destructive, or is just a negative overall experience. And then on top of that, now when they go out and they try to date, there's all these other accommodations, right? The child has to be put to bed, that someone has to maybe babysit the child depending on the time. How is this other person going to see that their former lover has moved on? Are they going to try to sabotage the relationship? So there's all these things that fall along. And I know that, like online, there's always this joke that, they say don't ever date like a single parent, right? Especially like single mothers. Like they're off limits, don't ever date them. But at the end of it all, many people, regardless if they're have children or not, They still want to experience love or experience love again. They still want to experience a companionship. They still want to have someone they can communicate with. I wonder, and I'll ask you this: what are some of the ways that the single parents can position themselves to be the best that they can be when they're on the dating market to find a person that's going to treat them the way that they need to be treated?
I think it's just to be open and honest about it. Like, because I was a single parent, I class myself as fortunate that I didn't have the involvement at all. So I didn't have that back and forth. Will they have the kid? Will they not? It's pros and cons with that, because if it's the other person's time to have the kid, obviously you can go out and date or whatever. But I didn't have that. But for me, I'm happy with how my life was. But what I find is oh, I lost my train of thought now, sorry. Um, yeah, so basically, because I was a single parent and I had a child, I knew straight away I didn't want to date anyone with multiple children, because although I only had one kid and I was on my own, it was difficult, and I didn't want to jump into a relationship with anyone if they had more than one kid. And I particularly didn't want to really date anyone with kids either, because it's a lot of dynamics. There's two lots of family rules. If you don't get on, you might have one, you might think about solving situations one way, they might think of it as another. So there's lots of things like that. But one of the things I used to always ask if there was someone and they had a kid was, do you get on with the other parents? Because I did not want to jump into a toxic relationship, get my son involved, where there could be some toxicity that we could get dragged into as well from an ex. And I didn't want to be like a pawn in any game either with that. And so one of the first things I would say was, what's the relationship like with the parents? Do you get on, or don't you get on? If they like we didn't get on, then I wouldn't go anywhere near there, because it's not a healthy place to be. So a lot of profiles you did go on, and some people were quite open if you've got kids and not interested, and that's absolutely fine. It's everyone's preference. But I think if you've got kids, you need to be open about it. You need to say, you've got to say your situation. And my profile, because I'm quite stubborn, used to say I've got a kid but I don't need a dad as such, because I'm not looking for that father figure. It was more for company for me, because I can do it all. So I don't even think in coming in straight away and playing dad. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking for me, for my partner, and then obviously that would all come with it. But it would be, people need to understand as well that sometimes things with kids can happen. They get ill and they have to be lenient. So when I actually met my partner, my son had a broken leg at the time. So obviously things although, he was in a cast, so things were different, but obviously you've got to take things like that into account. Things like that can happen. They can get ill. When they're young, especially the amount of like A&E trips and everything that you can have with them, they just got to remember that the kid comes first. So you're allowed to have a partner, but the child ultimately, to an extent, has to come first as well. But people in there, completely up to them. If they don't want to date people with kids, they need to be honest about it as well. And also, if either them want further children as well, that all needs to be, you know, and put on to the beginning, really, so everyone knows where they stand. And there's no point diving in if it's not going to go anywhere, because again, you're using a lot of energy and a lot of time and everything else that goes with it.
Some parents will express that they're told that their value is lower than let's say women, than someone who doesn't have children. Some parents will feel that a lot of people won't want them for companionship, for a serious relationship, for maybe even marriage, because they have the child, because they see the child as baggage, or they see the child as a connection to someone else that maybe that person doesn't get along with, or they don't just want to involve themselves, as you mentioned. And I can see that point of view tying into why so many single mothers and fathers don't vet the potential partners in the way that you described, because maybe they're thinking, okay, if I don't take Johnny, if I don't take Jane, will there be another one that comes along? Because I remember 20 years ago, when I was in my 20s, child free, I had my pick of the litter, right? As soon as I walk outside the house, I had to beat them off with a stick, Kelly. I was so sexy, right? Now I'm 20 years older, my belly's a little bit bigger, there's a couple of wrinkles on my face, and I have a child. Am I still going to have that same experience? And a lot of people will say no. So now, instead of asking maybe the questions that are important, they don't ask those questions. But then I look to you now and I ask, how important is it still for parents, regardless of their age, regardless of how many children they have, to still ask the appropriate questions when they are dating?
It's 100%. And if again, it's that feeling of they don't want to ask those questions because they're desperate for that company and things like that, then it's again, it goes back to they haven't healed, they're not loving themselves, they're not valuing themselves. And predominantly that got to come first before anything else. Even though you love your kids, that's still gonna come top, right underneath next to your kid or equal to it as well. They're both really important. So, I knew what I didn't want. I probably didn't know what I wanted, but I knew what I didn't want. And I think if you have a list of this is what I don't want, it might make it easier then to find who you want, because we have a long list like this of who we want, but we've only got a short list of what we don't want. So basically, we should really focus on what you don't want, and then it'll leave you with what you want, basically.
One thing I did, I love that you said that, because one thing I did with one of a female friend of mine is I asked her that question. I didn't even ask her what she wanted. I asked her, tell me what you don't want. And she was like, one after another. It was to the point where I could have did like a whole load of laundry. And she just kept going with what she didn't want, right? So I said, okay, I'm gonna make it easy for you. Just tell me five. Just give me five. Not 5,000, just five. And she gave me five. So I was like, okay, so the opposite of these five things are exactly what you want. She's like, what do you mean? I was like, well, you said that you don't want someone that is running around and has multiple women. So what you want is someone that is going to be able to connect with you and you alone. You mentioned that you don't want someone that's in between jobs and they don't know where their money is coming from. Perfect. So what you want is you want someone that is established, that has a job where they can see a good future and things of that nature. I 100% agree with you that asking questions is so important, because I truly believe we don't ask enough questions, and more so, we don't ask the right questions. If you were to look at our job, how many times, and maybe you've done this, before you actually want to apply for something, what do you do? What kind of company is it? What are the benefits? Can I see myself there? I think we need a similar approach, because a lot of people, Kelly, I'll tell you, they go into this dating market and they're like, Train, all I need is hopes and dreams,
Yeah, I've
right?
been there. I've absolutely been there, basically. So when my first long-term relationships, we were together like 6 years. We had a house together and everything, and then that ended. And we met in real life, so I'd never even heard of Plenty of Fish. And then like I started, because my friends were like, just get out there, start dating, just move on, basically. And like my God, it was just like in those 6 years, how life had changed. Like people didn't have any morals. It was like you met with someone, oh yeah, like we'll meet up again. You talk, and then like they go quiet and stuff, and it's just like people, because they're behind a phone, they don't think you're a real person. And I'm very loyal and trustworthy, so what people say, I literally take it almost to heart what people say. So it learns a lot then to go from one side of things to this other. And like I still don't know why I did it, but again, at the time it was because I didn't value myself, I didn't love myself. So 10 years ago, that would have been me. So it's only because I've gone through tough times and I've toughened up and I just don't take any shit anymore, basically. It's so that was exactly me. Like I said, my hopes and dreams, they might be the one. And then, you just pull the wrong ones. I did meet the one. I've got my son from it. That's the only good thing I've had from it. And obviously also my current partner. But apart from that, it's you can't go anywhere with hopes and dreams. Even if you're at one stage, as you know, like I said, I'm very forward. At one stage, even my profile right at the top, I'm not interested in like sex or these texts or meetups. If don't bother messaging me. And but like people don't read the profiles, so they would just go on, or your profile clearly says looking for a long-term relationship, and then they'd be like, oh, I'm in Cardiff for the Saturday night. Do you want to stay in my hotel? Like, no, fuck off, basically. Do you know what I mean? It's no. Can't you read? And that's time, that's energy, and it's just like, oh my God, what earth is the how are these people being brought up? How is this life different like? So it's a massive shock, the online world. And again, it's the only way we can do it. Most people, especially as a single parent, there was no way, unless I met someone over the park or at a soft play, you're not ideally, and you're not looking for someone either there because you're concentrating on your kids. So for a lot of single parents, it is the only way to try and find someone as well. So it's you feel you haven't got any other option.
Yeah, they saw the blonde hair, Kelly, and that was more than enough for them when it came to your profile, right? Like people don't read those things. I remember someone shared with me that they were looking for marriage, right? Like that's their goal. They wanted to date with
Mhm.
that intent. And they would tell me that there was people like he would go on dates and there'd be women out there that there would be everything but that. And it's strange because you're looking at it and it's like I clearly wrote this specifically for those type of people, right? Like the ones who are marriage minded, it's okay if they don't read it because they're coming in with that intent. The ones who are just, as you mentioned, who are just looking for sex or looking for something else, it's for them to say that, hey, not
Yeah,
here, not this girl, not this guy. It's over there. Go over there, right?
yeah, completely.
So I wonder because like the late like when I look at the research, like most people are using the dating apps to date. So it's going to become more popular and it's going to be more commonplace, which it is now. But putting the dating to the side, when you have the single parents who are trying to date, but they're still trying to maintain their career, which is going to finance all of this, right? Which is going to finance their lifestyle, finance their children. Do you see them having the same amount of difficulty or similar difficulty in their jobs that they're having in their dating life as well?
Possibly if the person isn't necessarily working, which for me would have been a red flag, would have been like, well, no, because I've got a kid, I'm on my own. There's no way I not even want to pay for you because you're not a priority in my life, if you know what I mean. Obviously, something like a coffee and that, but going forward, how you meant to, because bear in mind, I was always looking for the marriage, the long-term thing, even when I was broken up with someone, even when I was a single mom, my end goal has been that long-term relationship. So, you're always thinking of that down the line. So people didn't have jobs or that, not interested. And it sounds really, really horrible because I had depression as well. If people were messaging me and they had it, I wouldn't go anywhere near them because I had been through it and it was difficult. There was no way I could support someone with mental health problems and bring up a child. And because that would have a massive effect on your life as well. So, but it would be really difficult to do to work, you're building your career and focusing on the dating world, especially if they're not a nice person or they're not working themselves, or again, they're not understanding that, yeah, you're working and then you're coming home and sorting your kid out, and then you might be too tired to go out on a date or whatever, or maybe you want to stay in or whatever. It's understanding that it's not just a job. Like I said, when you're a parent, you never switch off, do you? So, your kid could have got up in the night, or, you're up from 5, 6 in the morning with them. You've got to sort them out before you even go into work. And as soon as you get home from work, the first thing you do is get them from childcare. And then you've got them until bedtime, and then you want to just go to bed yourself, basically.
Do you think it's difficult for some people to establish that boundary and that preference and hold it while dating?
I think if people didn't necessarily have kids, they would, because unless you've had it and unless you're a hands-on parent, you wouldn't know basically. And especially when they get, it's not so bad when they get older, like 5, 6, 7. But when they're like younger, 3, 4, 2, it's absolutely knackering having when they're that age and you're on your own with them. And even if you're not on your own with them, that's such a difficult and hard age as well. So yeah, yeah.
I look at it as some people will establish what they want and they don't maintain it, right? So I'll give you an example. So they'll say that I want to date with the intention of a long-term relationship. I don't want to play any games. I want to do this. But then sometimes what happens is they find themselves caught up in those situations, and then they become unfortunately comfortable in it. So it's one person after another, and now they lost their ideals and their goals because they've haven't been able to be firm in it and say no, this is what I want. And I wonder how much of that comes down to, as you mentioned, desperation and not being healed, because when you're desperate, bad things usually follow. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's like you attract the energy around you, isn't it? So it's, if you're negative, you attract it because that's all you're thinking about. So you don't see any of the positive because you're not thinking about it. So you're naturally going to be attracting all that negativity because everything around you is negative. So you're just assuming, oh, it's negative, it's going to happen, and it does happen because we attract that basically. So if you're just thinking, oh, I don't want another person like this, or are settle for someone if they're half decent, that's still, attracting negativity because we're not focusing on the positive. So we're not focusing on that positivity around us and that positive energy to come to us.
How were you able to find that and make it work in your own life?
So like I said, for me, it was just that, like that epiphany, that moment when my son was a baby and, I'd been on dates and it was just like, this isn't, I don't need it. It was just like that light bulb moment. It was just like, well, I thought I needed it, but I actually didn't. And then, like I said, it was a couple of years then before I even went back on it. And I was quite happy. Obviously, there's times where you feel, oh, it would be nice, but never enough to actually take action and do it because clearly didn't want it at that time.
Did you ever experience loneliness or being alone? And if so, how did you handle that?
Um, Obviously you do a lot when you've got a baby and a young child. They're taking up a lot of the time. It's mainly for things like when, like, say you went out and about. So if like you went on a trip or something, it would just be you when you're having to do everything. So it was more in those situations, or like say then in the evenings, although it would be nice, sometimes you'd think, oh, it'd be nice to have someone to sit and watch a telly with. Sometimes you'd be too tired and you think, I'm glad there's no one here because I just don't want to talk to anyone. I just want 5 minutes to myself, and I don't want to even have to think of having a conversation or anything. I just want to sit in my pajamas and fall asleep at 8:30 without having to worry about trying to talk to someone or thinking of someone else as such.
There's a breakup that I had, and when I came out of that relationship, I vowed to myself that I'm going to take time to heal me,
Mhm.
because it was a relationship that ended, that left me with a lot of questions that I needed to answer, because unfortunately I couldn't go to that person because the communication at that point was so poor.
Mhm.
And I think that is a difficult position to be in, because if you're trying to have closure and resolve something and you don't get it, a lot of people get so focused on the closure that they miss everything that's in front of them. So, what I did is I began to understand, Train, what is it that you truly, truly want? And what is it that you need to fix and or change about yourself to do so? And that allowed me to go on a journey to identify what my triggers were, what I was sensitive about. And it was very eye opening for me to understand myself in that way. When you were exiting that situation with the father of your child, and then you're dating, and then you ultimately found the success that you did, what types of conversations were you having with yourself to continue your own improvement and your own growth?
So you said before, um, before that habit, it didn't get to a point later on, like I said, when he was a few years old, that I'd learned to value myself as such with it. So it was only at that point where, so beforehand I didn't, because I was in those wrong places at the time, basically. So it was only later on I had learned to do that. So come the last time, that was a different situation to the years before, because I had my boundaries and I had my, this is why I'm not accepting. So life, things were absolutely completely different then. So for
Kelly,
me, I'd rather than and the last time was rather than looking at the end goal, I was looking at now rather than too far ahead. And I think that's what made the difference as well. Like I said, it was that numbers game. It was now, not not looking at trying to picture 10 years down the line.